as a 34-year-old who'd barely just stopped playing, in trepidation. It was a daunting task. I can remember in one game we played Chelsea, where Jose's second year at Chelsea, and we looked to try and make a substitute to affect the game. And I looked over at Shevchenko, and I thought to myself, he's worth more than all our staff, all our players, and the club generally.
Well, hello and welcome to the next UCFB MMA Insights Series interview. My name's Neil. I'm from the UCFB marketing team. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the England Under-21 manager, Aidy Boothroyd. Aidy, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks very much for having me on.
No, thank you for joining us. I'm looking forward to finding out a bit more about your career now, if that's okay. So I want to go right back, you're coming towards the end of your playing career. Was managing always part of your future plans? And if it was, have you become the kind of manager you maybe thought you'd be?
Well, to answer your question, I was always involved in all the social. Was the social secretary of all the clubs that I played for. I generally organised all the nights out and organised all the lottery when we first started doing that all those years ago. But within that, I'd always worked in the evening at the clubs I'd worked at. So Mansfield, Peterborough, Hearts, all the clubs that I'd been at, Bristol Rovers. I'd done a little bit either in the afternoon coaching or in the evening, because it was something that I wanted to be a coach, not necessarily a manager, but I wanted to be a coach and to help players to develop, to become better players. It wasn't until I got towards the end of my career, I think, when I was sort of forced into it, I had that may sound quite bad. I had a bad injury. I broke my leg, but it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me, because that was the year that the academies came into play. Howard Wilkinson's Charter for Quality. So as that came in, I had to retire through injury and just fell nicely into a job as under-17 manager for Peterborough. So that was me preparing, if you like. What I've ended up the sort of manager that I hope. One thing that has gone through my career, I think I've got miles better in terms of the tactical side of the game and an understanding and working with good players and playing against good players. The best in the world can enhance you as a coach. But I think one thing that's probably stayed the same is how I am with people and how I would stretch people, push people, to be the best that they can be, and always put it on the player, empowering the player to keep going and to deal with setbacks. But probably from a personal point of view, I think I've remained the same, but certainly developed some of the other disciplines of coaching and managing and leadership.
Were there any managers you played under or maybe played against who you really admired and you could maybe say have influenced your career in the dugout?
Well, yeah, I think sometimes we sort of take the good from people and we also take the not so good from people. So I've been really fortunate. I worked with Jerry Francis, very, very different to Malcolm Allison, who I worked with for a little while, to Barry Fry, who I worked with, to Andy King, who I worked with, who were all my managers. And I took a little bit of their best bits, if you like. Whether it be in Andy's case, he was brilliant with the players, a real players manager. With Barry, just like to see how he worked a boardroom or how he worked the media. An absolute master class in terms of he just seems to know everybody. In terms of coaching and the detail of coaching, probably again Malcolm Allison was ahead of his time in terms of what he coached and how he coached it. But I was very fortunate that I'd worked with some good coaches. Phil Neal was another one who I'd worked with, and these are all guys that just you take a little bit off as you're going along and as you're forming your own opinions.
Now, in your first full season in charge of the first team at Watford, obviously got promotion to the Premier League. Obviously for the club, that was huge. But for you, on a personal level, how big was that achievement?
Well, it's an achievement for a group of people, from the chairman to the chief exec to myself to the players, the staff. Everybody connected with Watford at that time was all rowing in the same direction. Everybody was very positive about what we were trying to do. The year before we finished sixth from bottom, we were going into the season as probably everybody's favourites for relegation, especially with a rookie manager. You know, we had the fifth lowest budget and we managed to get 81 points, finish third and go up through the playoffs into the Premier League. So as a 34-year-old who'd barely just stopped playing, in trepidation, it was a daunting task. I can remember in one game we played Chelsea, where Jose's second year at Chelsea, and we looked to try and make a substitute to affect the game. And I looked over at Shevchenko, and I thought to myself, he's worth more than all our staff, all our players, and the club generally. So it was a real, it was a real baptism of fire, if you like, for me as a 34-year-old, going up against Mourinho, Sir Alex, Alan Kerbishley, guys that were at the top end, Martin, Rafael Benitez, you know, really, really good coaches and managers and leaders of people. So for me as a 34-year-old, it made a huge impression on me.
I'm trying to kind of now go to obviously the start of your time in the various England youth setups. Did you have to adapt to your kind of coaching philosophy at all, going from kind of EFL clubs then into coaching some of the best young players in the country, or is it a case that a coach's method should be fairly adaptable to any age or any ability?
Well, I think in terms of a coach should always look to stretch his players. A coach should empower his players, and you can do that and test them and stretch them in a number of different ways. Technically, the difference between the players at Under-21 England level compared to the teams that I've had in the, well, I've worked at every level. So League Two technically will be a lot different to what you would get in the top leagues, Premier Leagues, and the international football. So my philosophies, in terms of how to develop people, hasn't changed, but my knowledge base and my ability to grow as a coach and to get better and to always be searching to find the edge to be better. Certainly, that has grown and changed over a period of time, depending on the players that I'm working with, because I think every good coach manages to get the best out of his players, but also hide any weaknesses. And I think we've seen that with the best teams.
And is there any particular key differences as to how you might coach the different youth levels in the England setup, 21s, 18s, 17s? Is there any difference at all to that?
Well, we have to sort of fast track our players when they come in, Neil. So it's almost like a little microwave we put them in. We've got 2 days to prepare for an international game, qualification usually, so it counts. We've got 2 days to prepare it coming into March for a tournament for the Euros. So we've got to be really good at making mistakes and getting better quicker. We've got to be really good at learning from the things that haven't worked out well. And we've got to be able to prioritise and get that, the 80-20 principle. Rather than trying to be brilliant at everything, what are the key 2 things that are going to make us better as a team in terms of the way that we play the game and what we do? And I think probably the simplest way to put it in terms of the training would be, with better players, you can work in tighter spaces. And you can stretch the players more and challenge them more, because I think that's key in making sure that you challenge them, but at the same time, you try to develop players, win games, and also improve the team and win matches.
And obviously, in the international setup, you've got players spread all over the country, sometimes abroad as well. What methods do you and your team employ to ensure you've got all the necessary information you need about those players to then obviously when you come to picking your squads and picking your teams?
Well, it's all about relationships. I think that's the key, to have a rapport with and an empathy, I think, with what the coaches and managers and players are going through. If we act like we're a little island and that, you know, what we say goes, we're going to have a problem. It's about working together with the clubs. And I think over the last, certainly the time I've been here, 6 years, I've seen a real positive, some real positive relationships growing. Yeah, of course there are challenges, there always are. But if our multidisciplinary team, our coaches, our senior management, if they don't connect with their counterparts at the club, and we don't have the players' best interests at heart, then that relationship or relationships is going to fall down. So it's important that we work with the clubs. They are the club's players, and we add our little bit of icing on the cake right at the end in terms of international experience and playing for the country.
Now, sticking with relationships, how does your relationship with Gareth Southgate work? When it comes to players maybe making a step up from the 21s to the senior team, do you recommend players, or does he come to you looking for advice on who to take on?
It's a little bit of both, really. I mean, I'm fortunate that Gareth took me with the senior team to Russia for the World Cup. So for a coach or manager or leader at any level to be able to go and spend time pretty much just following Gareth around and watching what he did and how he coped, and watching what the MDT did in the senior team, how we prepared, fascinating things and great insight for me. You know, worth joining the FA just for that experience. You know, the World Cups and European Championships that I've seen and been to. But we have a very close relationship. You know, Gareth and I worked closely when he was running the 21s and I was doing the 20s and the 19s before that. It was his suggestion that I moved into his office with himself and Steve Holland, regularly talking about players. Probably because of the current situation, we're not speaking as much as we normally do. But Monday, Tuesday, we're regularly in the office discussing players, discussing form, discussing players that maybe can come up from the 21s that could push and challenge some of the guys in the senior team. And the pathway in general, there's a link between myself, Lee Carsley with the 20s, all of John McDermott, all the way to the under 15s, up to the senior team. It's an area that we think gives us an edge. But in terms of getting players at the top end through from the pathway into the seniors, you know, in the end, it's down to the England manager to be able to have the bravery to play young players, and he certainly proved that. You know, we got 22 players through the pathway into the senior team over a period of like 6 years. You know, that's a good return.
Obviously, that Russia World Cup was in the middle of a real kind of golden patch for England and its youth teams when so many came back with medals from various tournaments. What was it like to be at St George's Park at that time with all that kind of success running around?
Well, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. And, you know, one thing that we said at that particular time is we're nowhere near finished. We've got a lot of work to do. We had a golden period for a couple of years. Started off by Dan Ashworth and the people that he brought in, high quality coaches and MDTs, processes, you know, really beefed up the department. But that was only our little bit. The majority of the work was done by the players. The EPPP made a big difference in terms of England's players in academy systems that were getting better and better. St George's Park, as you mentioned, made a big difference to us, because you could have Harry Kane walking down to training, bumping into an under 15. You know, it was a huge buy-in from everybody, really, and a great effort to win the tournaments that we didn't get to the last stages. But again, that comes from relationships with the clubs. It comes from the relationships within the FA and the national teams, and that again, ability. When you know you're in a golden period, it's because you've got everybody rowing in the same direction, and you know, we certainly got that at that particular time. Was a great time and a great period. But it's on to the next one. It's trying to make sure we can sustain that over a period of, you know, 20, 30, 40 years, and just be custodians of our positions, compared to just having a one-hit wonder. We want to come again and again.
How do you and other coaches keep young players, their feet on the ground, when they achieve that kind of success at such a young age on the international stage? How do you kind of keep them grounded?
Well, I think first of all, anybody that's been young, which is pretty much everybody, have made mistakes, and I think these guys are in a position where the media is such a huge beast, and social media even bigger, and it's important that that they do keep their feet on the ground, and that they're in the back pages, metaphorically, for doing great things. In terms of the games, and in football. But what we've seen recently is likes of Raheem and Marcus that have used their platform for lots of positive reasons, and they've got to be applauded on that. As for our young guys, I think it's part and parcel of youth that people get carried away with themselves sometimes. I think it's life. People have success. They sometimes, depending on the sort of character they are, they'll make mistakes. But it's not the making the mistakes; it's the coming back and going again. Because to be a top player or a top anything at any level, it's really important that you've got longevity, and that you make a different mistake the next time, and learn and stay focused on what it is that you're there to do, which is to keep improving, take that responsibility, be empowered to want to be the best that you can be, and if you can do that, then you give yourself the best chance of having a really good career, because it is about longevity. It's about being in the game for as long as you can, playing at the highest level that you can. And that's the same for the coaches as well.
And that leads me on nicely to my final question for you, Aidy, is that for the young people watching this who aspire to work in football and sport, whether that's coaching, whether it's media, whether it's business, what one piece of key advice can you give them to go on and be a success?
I think it's a tough world out there, and I think that the opportunities are in the world that we live in are going to be limited. But I think two things. If I can steal two things, one, I'd say bloody mindedness. Keep going. Keep being resilient. Take the knockbacks, because they will come, and be positive and deal with them and move on to the next thing. And the other thing, I think, because I've got two, I would say is flexibility. Is that it might not work for you the first time you do it, but you've got to find a different way to do it, whatever it is. I think it's really important that you have the tenacity to keep going, and the flexibility to really recognise when things aren't going your way, that you might have to do something different and look outside the box. That'd be my two bits.
That's great. Aidy Boothroyd, thank you so much for your time today.